Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hour of Healing, where each week we talk about life changing and thought provoking topics that are engineered to bring you healing no matter what stage in life you are in. I am your weekly host, Joe Debra, and today we are talking about an all important conversation with the title Outward Smiles, Inward Screams. Friends, we have with us friends for this show who were with us last season on Hour of Healing. First, we have Dr. Norma Obona, who is a family medicine provider in Ohio and also a wound care provider as well. Congratulations on that, Norma. And then we have Dr. Christine Tolu Ajayi, who is a family medicine physician at Emory in Atlanta, Georgia. Friends, it will be great to have a conversation with them today. As I mentioned, we are talking about outward smiles, inward screams. This is about our work and our callings. You know, many a times we hear the phrase that people hate Monday mornings because they have to go to work. But the question is, why really do people hate Monday mornings so much if that actually is true? Well, could it be that in our pursuit to do good for the people we work with and work for, that most of what we are going through does not stem out of a cheerful heart? Or could it be that it stems out of a cheerful heart, but the things that we have to deal with to be able to go about our day-to-day activities brings about inward screams? Well, our panel is here to help us dive into this today. And since they are both physicians, we will be talking more about the medical field. But trust me, it's not just going to be a talk about medicine today. So, Norma and Christine, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
All right, sounds good. Sounds like you have some outward smile right now, but it could be an inward scream, Christine.
We'll find out by the end of the show.
So the first question that I will ask, and we will start with Christine on this, because whenever we come out of school or trainings and go to the work field, we all go with expectations. We all go with things that we hope it will be. So, what are some of the expectations or perceptions that young workers have, and how do we go about even analyzing or assessing our workplace? For instance, in your healthcare field, how did you go about assessing those expectations, those things that you were hoping to see? If you can take us from there.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I will go back to the beginning of how things start, when you are young, you're thinking about what you're going to do with your life, and then you're
Mm.
thinking about how it's going to add to your life, like the money you're going to make from it. Maybe you can buy that nice house, that nice car, when I get a good job, I can finally afford this perfume or that lotion. It could be something as small as that. I know for me, it was like with every job I did before I finally got into medicine, it would be like, okay, I'm earning X amount of money now. If I'm able to do this, I can earn this. And I remember a long time ago, probably before I was a med student, I saw someone with a tin opener that was really fancy, and
Mm.
like you just put it on. I don't know if it was electric, and I don't remember how much it was. Maybe it was like $12 or so. And at that time, that seemed like a huge amount of money for me
Mm.
to spend on just a tin opener. And I was like, one day I'm going to buy this tin opener. And so finally, one day I finally did, and I felt like I had made it because I think I was.
Good.
I don't think I was in med school yet, but I think I was working and earning some money, and I was able to splurge that. So I think financial independence is the first thing that, or one of the major things that many people think about when you are thinking about that job, because it's a sacrifice you are making to school, to go to your training and all that to get that job. And the payoff is to get financial independence or financial freedom.
Mm.
And then another thing is job security. With the medical field, you're always going to need doctors, nurses, everybody else that works in the field, because people are going to be sick and people are going to need healthcare, good healthcare. And so, you'll always have a job. And so job security is something I think people always view and think about when you're thinking about the healthcare. And even when you're picking a career as well. You want to pick something that would be secure. Your family would tell you, oh, is this going to sustain you if you pick something else? So financial security, job security, and then of course following your passion. That ideally should come first. But reality, sometimes you don't always follow your passion. If I followed my passion, I'll be an actress today. I might be a starving actress, but I'll be following my passion. So I think following your passion as well is something people do. So financial security, job security, following your passion and your interest, and then your ability to add or change things in the world. Because for most people, they want to do better, they want to make a change, they want to feel like something that you do matters. So I think those are the things that people think about when they are looking for a job, when they start a job, and you hope those things, add to your life and make your life better and help you be happy.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I'll be coming back to you to dive into how you go about finding these things once you have seen that contract. But I want to ask Norma because I think I had read somewhere that 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 new physicians, that is graduates coming out of residency, don't stay with their first job, their first, whether hospital or clinic, the first place that they are employed. And so, with both of you being in the medical field, what are some of the things that you think impact these? Because Christine just outlined for us some of the expectations or the desires that we all have going into that first job or that first office, that first hospital. So why this stunning statistic about 1 in every 3 physicians or so not staying with their first place?
So I think it's really is quite multifactorial when you look at it. There a lot of the expectations don't meet reality
Mm,
sometimes. That's one of it. Number two, when you're coming out of residency, we're quite green. So I'll say we because I experienced that. We're quite green, we're quite naive. We don't always read the fine print in the contracts given to us, and
mm,
we are excited to jump in and start our full-fledged attending jobs and the money we've been hoping to earn for quite a while. So a lot of times we don't really read the fine details and really reading between the lines. So when we get in there, it's like, oh, you know. But so I mean, I've been in the same job since residency, so this is my third year in there, and for the majority, it's been great. But of course, medicine is what it is today, and um, we're never really taught the business side of medicine, and I think that's hits us in the face when we get in there, and the administrative burden kind of takes over the time we always wanted to spend with our patients. And
mm,
those are some things I've had to really reconcile with and really learn to find a balance and walk that fine line. It's definitely not easy, but I think those are the biggest things that have really jumped out at me, and from a lot of other physicians that I have come in contact with, these are similar things that have caused them to make a trajectory. For some people, they realize it's actually not cut out for them, and they actually want something different, and they want something more fine-tuned, more of a subspecialty. Some decide to go back and do a fellowship or change the entire course and go into a non-clinical role, and some people, leave medicine altogether. So the realities, when you look at the entire big picture, I think are the main reasons why. But some people have personal reasons as well.
wow. And I can only imagine entering the business field and then finding that the administrative aspect of the job that you wanted to do becomes so overwhelming that it actually chokes out the desire and the passion that Christine did mention for us. So certainly we see that in medicine, but we do see that in other careers as well, where certain aspects of what people expected or what they desired really doesn't up to where they were. And
Mhm.
so I'll take it back to Christine, because I said we will get back to her on that. And I want to kind of tie both questions together for Christine, really, because here we are as young people entering the work field or in our final year of training or grad school or whatever it is. Imagine yourself sitting across from this young person, or they listening to us today, and they have the passion, they have the desire, the earning that they could make, as you so rightly listed for us. And then there is this area where sometimes the reality of things don't meet up with the expectations. So for that young person who is sitting in the chair listening to us right now, about to probably signed a contract without reading it. What are some of the things that, Christine, you can share with this young person to kind of give them a better perspective? And also, the second part of your question is, what are some of the things that they can do once they get into that job to be able to make it work for them?
I think it's very important to understand what it is that you want, or how you want your clinic to run as a young person coming out of residency. It's difficult to picture it yourself because you've always worked under people and you are kind of given a routine and you don't question it, you just go for it. So when you're coming out the first time as an attending, everything kind of looks good because you are the boss. Oh, how do you like this? Oh, I don't know. It's okay. Yeah, this room looks fine. Yeah, no, I don't mind the color. Okay, you have to share an office with somebody. Okay, it's no problem. I can do that. I was in a room with 10 other residents in residency. So I think knowing what it is that you want, what your clinic is going to look like, is going to be very important. So the things that I mentioned, like, are you going to be sharing an office? Is it important for you to share an office with somebody? Would that help you work faster? Or do you mind, or you wouldn't mind having somebody with you, to talk to, and the social aspect of it? How many patients you want to see? That's something that's very important. Is it important to put that in the contract? I think it is. Most contracts doesn't have that, but if it's important to you, then it should be in the contract, because even though they might tell you, oh yes, you might see 16 patients a day, but the reality, it would be like, oh, your schedule can see 23 patients. And so you might end up seeing that 23 patient and getting burnt out really easily. So if it's important enough to you, you can put it in the contract and say, okay, I don't want to see more than 16. I don't want to see more than 18. Then I think also the financial aspect of it as well, when you get off guarantee, because majority of the time, at least for the first year, most people that start are always on guarantee. So, when you get up on guarantee, what's going to happen? Are you going to be earning the same amount of money? Am I going to experience a drop? There are some places who offer you a lower amount of money because they know if they offer you higher when you get off guarantee, then you have a drop in pay, and nobody likes that. And there are places that offer you a
Mm,
lot to entice you, but then they don't tell you that when you get off guarantee, you're going to have a drop in pay because you're not seeing X amount of patients, or you didn't meet your
correct.
productivity and all that. And so I think those questions, I think, are important to ask. Then your staffing is a major issue when it comes to any type of clinic, any type of healthcare thing. So what's the staffing like? Are you going to be having, are people always calling out? Is there a high turnover of the staff in the clinic? So I think those things that we don't necessarily think about, those are like some finer things that you would discover when you get in. But then by then it might be too late, because you're like, oh, I didn't think about the fact that this doctor that's been working here for 5 years has had 10 different MAs, and then now I don't have an MA and have to share an MA with two other doctors, and it's slowing down my time and slowing down my clinic. Or you don't think about, okay, I have to share an office with somebody who talks a lot and I'm not able to write my notes, and it's taking me 1 hour to write one note when if I was by myself, I would have written it in 5 minutes, or people coming in and out, slamming the door. There are just lots of little small things that I don't think about, but you have to think about, how do I want my day to day to go? You have to think about, how do I see myself running this clinic? And then those fine things, those little nuances, if it's important enough, you put it in the contract. If they want you, then they will have to accept it. And then so that way, you are not too unhappy when things start to go wrong, because you've thought ahead, you have a plan, and you have tried to fix some things ahead of time. And then remind me the second part of your question.
How do you go about reconciling the two, that when you have signed the contract and you've gotten in there, and the reality of it doesn't seem to kind of match up to where you wanted it to be, and we can turn it to normal.
I think it's really having that discussion with yourself, first of all, an internal discussion with ourselves, I would say, and knowing what our ideologies are and what our personal boundaries are. And it's important to express and acknowledge the personal boundary and also communicate that to work, because if you don't set boundaries and you let them know what your boundaries are, they're going to use you, and they will, because you're hired, so when you set your boundaries, that's where the respect grows, and you can communicate that in a very respectful manner. And also make sure you're taking care of your patients and you have access and all that. So that's the first thing I usually say, and that would usually follow from there. um, and then just as Christine mentioned, in terms of our expectations, we have and knowing what we want to do, you can model things into how you want to do, and there's usually room for adjustments. Again, because of where medicine is, some of the challenges you might encounter when you're trying to have those discussions with work are, is it going to be lucrative, whatever you want to do? So for example, if you say you want to do a hybrid, meaning you want to do some family medicine and then something else you're passionate about that still connects to the outpatient practice or family medicine space. So, for example, if it's obesity medicine, if it's wound care, or any other sports medicine, they want to know that they can seamlessly put that into the regular weekly schedule and make it work, so you can still see the same um, patients that you need to see, and you can also still enjoy the other things that you want to do on the side and kind of combine that. So it's really selling that idea to work and making sure that you have a good plan in mind and you present it well, and it's something that will be lucrative. So I think some health systems are more open than others. Some are, 100% mono. Whatever we hired you to do is what you have to do. But again, it's all communication. And if that's what they want, if you feel like you are moving to something else and you get more passionate about something else, the world is your oyster. You can, choose to change things around and look for something else that fits you better. But you have to know where you're comfortable. Range is and what you're open to. But again, a lot of it is being comfortable having these discussions, setting those boundaries, and a lot of times dealing with the guilt efficiently, because we encounter a lot of guilt in terms of, we don't want to inconvenience anybody else. We don't know if we should speak up about different things. But from what I've learned, speak up. The
Mm.
the answer will always be no if you don't speak up. So speak up, say something. If they say no, okay, I'll see if I can handle that. If not, okay, it's time to go. So all of those things are important, but it's just really being comfortable and learning what exactly you want it to look like and what you want to wake up every day to do. um you don't want to get to the point where it's becoming a drag and you can't handle, where everything goes. But again, you always have to remember that you signed a contract, so you have to abide by that contract, because
Correct.
that's what you're held to do.
Correct.
But then always communicate. I don't think anybody will fault you for being able to come to the table and have a discussion and say, hey, I know I signed this contract, but hey, I'm actually passionate about this. Is there room for me to do this? Can I do this? Can we build this? A lot of people are open to it. But again, like I said, if they're not, then you understand where you lie, and then you go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. It's interesting how you put it that if you don't say anything, then the answer will always be no. I think that's actually very important.
Hmm.
But then contracts become very difficult to get out of once you have signed. And so I know you both have mentioned contracts, but how does I guess, big corporations or companies where they have so many satellite clinics and offshoot sites, and so the contracts really are not generated from where you specifically will be working. So how does a person get them to work some of these things that we are talking about into those contracts? And I think we will go back to normal on that, and then I will have a question for Christine after that.
Yeah, so from my own contract, it's always spelled out where you're going to be located and the office that you'll be working out from primarily. If they want you to walk out from somewhere else, they will usually send a short addendum to the contract, including those places. So I had to do that when I volunteered to work at some of the respiratory clinics during the COVID period. So they included some of the additional clinics in there. And then when I was supervising at a different clinic, but every other contract I've seen has always spelled out where your primary location is going to be, because you have to be at that particular facility for the set number of hours. And remember, every contract has a time, stipulation, whether it's 1 year or 2 or 3 years. So it's either an evergreen contract where it just automatically renews unless you or the employer break the contract. Um, so there is a time stipulation. If it's not evergreen, then you guys have to come back to the table and discuss whether it's going to be continued or whatever the issue might be after then. But that's usually from all my contracts. I've had one particular place, written in the contract as my primary location, and then if anything changes, they amend it from there.
Yeah, so sorry, maybe the question wasn't clear. So I get the one location for the contract,
Hmm.
but then this is where we're talking about making sure that it's written in your contract that, hey, I want to see only 16 patients a day.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I want
Hmm.
to do that.
Hmm.
Most of the time, if you're dealing with big organizations, the actual contract is not coming from the location per se that you're going to be working at. So it
Hmm.
becomes difficult to make all these stipulations reflected in the contract. So my question, I guess, is how do you, as an individual who knows what you want,
Hmm.
because from what we're saying, it's important that you know what you want. So you know what you want. How do you go about getting it entered or reflected in the contract, knowing that, for instance, my organization, when I came in the contract that you signed, the original contract doesn't originate from the vicinity that I will be working in. It comes from our headquarters or wherever that is. And so
Hmm.
most of these things are pre written.
Hmm.
Bring it up because I remember when I was going through my contract, I was speaking with my recruiter and I said, hey, I want this in the contract. And they said, well, the contract really comes from a head office. So it's really something that is already written.
Hmm.
So I couldn't get that written in the contract. Even
Okay.
though those stipulations were made with the local office for me, it
Hmm.
wasn't something that was reflected in the contract. So if a new regime comes and
Hmm.
they want to kind of throw all that away, I guess I'll be at a loss because it's not in the contract. So
Yeah.
how can we go about getting those things in the contract? Is there a way to even be able to do that?
Yeah, one way you can try, again, not all corporations are open to making certain changes. Some say, hey, this is standard for our organization, and that's kind of how we go. So that's where it kind of boils down to you deciding whether you want to take what they're telling you, or you want to say, well, no, I need some negotiations done. But one thing that can definitely help is having a contract lawyer, and having the contract lawyer institute this and say, hey, this is what my client is requesting. Are you guys, so it's a whole negotiation. Are you guys open to what they're, asking for? And that gives you more power and leverage. And then at the end of the day, you get to say, okay, well, are they coming back to the table ready to play ball, or are they just saying, well, no, we're not going to negotiate? And that can give you clues into what they could be like downstream. Are they
True,
going to
true.
listen to you? Are they open to constructive ideas? Or if they're just shutting it down and saying, hey, no, this is what we do, take it or leave it, then you can take it or you leave it. So definitely getting a contract lawyer helps.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for clarifying that for us. And Christine, you had alluded to some form of workplace interactions in your previous answer when you were talking about do you want to share an office? People don't think about that. But that was, remember, one thing that was very important to me when I was going out of training. I wanted to make sure I have a personal space where if I want to dance, I want to dance. I mean, I don't want anybody watching me dance because I'm not that good. But I needed that personal space. And so, Christine, I want to ask you about workplace interactions. And I bring about workplace interactions because we're talking about medicine and clinics and things like that. And I remember I was driving cross states and I saw this big, gigantic billboard on the side of the highway, and it says, "Is your doctor?" I think it said, "Is your doctor a physician?" or something like that. Kind of alluding to APPs,
Yeah.
like NPs and PAs and things like that. And it took me a minute to kind of recognize that this is actually something that is happening on a large scale, on a national scale. We do have a lot of advanced care practitioners, it be PAs and NPs, and I mean, I have worked with some really great practitioners, advanced care practitioners. I remember when I was actually a medical student, one of the people who really taught me a lot in outpatient internal medicine was actually an NP. Well, she had like 3 doctorate degrees, so I don't know if it counts, but she was very knowledgeable, very good at what she was doing in the outpatient setting because all I knew about internal medicine was in the inpatient setting. So how do physicians balance that co-worker dynamics? Because patients ask about these things. I mean, you run into patients who say, "I don't want to see anybody by my doctor." How do doctors, or how should the doctor respond, and how do they balance these things?
I think everybody has their role, and doctors are specifically trained in a certain way. APPs are trained in another way. It's difficult for patients who don't know the difference to know, okay, what the training is. And they all know, okay, this person is just taking care of me. And some might feel, okay, yeah, doctor is better, or oh, my nurse practitioner actually knows more than my doctor, or not. So I think it's up to us, also up to the organization, to be clear, like who you're seeing. Okay, this is a physician who went to medical school, who's had, thousands and thousands of hours of training, who's gone through a residency. This is a nurse practitioner who's gone to their MP school and who is under this particular physician. So that means every decision that they make should be passed through the filter of their supervising physician to make sure that everything is accurate, because they don't have the same amount of training. And so now I think everybody's trying to fight for that same space because they feel like they're essentially doing the same thing, which is seeing and providing for patients, which is what we're doing. But the resources that we were we were had available in our training is quite different. So it makes our roles different. I was explaining to somebody else, like, you can't be mad at an orange that you have to cut and an orange that you have to peel open and have the little segments. They are both oranges, they both taste delicious, but they are different. One of them is bigger, you might have to do more work to get it, you get more juice out of it, and the other is smaller and you peel it open. So you can't exchange one for the other, but you can get similar things from them. And so I think understanding that on all parts, from the physician part, from the APP part, is the first step to doing that, to having that good workplace interaction, for the APP to know, okay, the decisions I make should go through the filter of the physician, and the physician should know, okay, I need to carefully look through what is being done to make sure that my patients are getting everything, getting the appropriate care that they need.
Well, thank you for that answer, but I have a question back, and either you or Norma can pick this up. As a matter of fact, I want both of you to actually answer the little pushback that I have, because you find in our day that, I mean, for one reason or the other, financial being one of it, that you can go to some organizations that there will be one physician, whether DO, MD, whatever it is, and then maybe 6 or 7 advanced care practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're telling me that we should know our role, and everything that the APPs are doing goes through the physicians. But if I'm not mistaken, not too long ago, there was this huge debate, whether through organizations or whatever, that they are trying to make APPs more autonomous now, where they can make their own decisions and things like that. So the question is twofold. How does that, from a patient perspective, how does that impact my care that I'm getting? Yes, sometimes some APPs are more knowledgeable about the patient's care than even the providers. Some have been doing this for several years and they have more experience. But it still doesn't negate the fact that you're telling me that everything goes through the physician, and that here we are, we have 7 APPs and one physician, and the physician is also seeing patients. So how does that dynamic work? Let's start with Norma, and then Christine can catch her breath. But how does this dynamic work from the patient's perspective?
The definite message that I hope every patient gets is we're all on the same team, geared towards taking care of them. Now, the way things have been set up in the country, I hope they get a bit more clear and restructured over the next couple of years. And I know there are a lot of places and states where APPs can practice independently and already do. So again, this differs from region to region, but we always talk about boundaries because that's very important. We all need to know our limitations, and those limitations are born out of our level of training. So we have to be very careful because patient safety is paramount. That's important. If we don't have a certain level of training, we cannot do certain things. So, for example, family practice and wound care, I cannot do what a surgeon does because I did not go through that training. So, we all have to respect that level and be true to ourselves and be very careful about how we practice. Because if we don't know something, it's okay to defer to somebody who has a higher level of training. But again, because we're human and our pride gets in the way, that can interfere with patient care. So that is a problem. And those are things that need to be fine tuned, definitely, with the community and with every health system. It's important to portray things as they are. And I know it can be confusing to the patient because they don't really know how to address an APP. They just call everybody doctor, but the APPs are not doctors because they haven't gone through medical school and residency. So there is a different level of training. Yes, they can take care of a lot of things that doctors can take care of, but because they don't have that background in basic sciences, and for the level of years and several hours of training that physicians do, there is a different level. So yes, they might have the experience, but the training is different. So for example, nurses who go on to be nurse practitioners, it's a different pathway for them. So it comes from a different way. Even if they have a doctor of nursing practice and they're called doctor, the training is different. It's more in an academic teaching setting rather than clinical patient care. They haven't had that certain number of hours in training that the doctor has. So those things are details that a lot of patients are not clear on, but they definitely need to understand. So when they're seeing someone, they know who they're seeing and what they're getting and the level of care that they are getting. And we always have to remember we live in America. That is, the legal system is a huge part of how we practice. So there are legal limitations that we have to keep in mind. But for the patient, I think it's very important that they know these differences and they understand what these differences mean for them. And that even if they're seeing an APP, if it's a complex case, they will still be taken care of because the APP can consult with the physician, which
Correct.
the physician assistants in my clinic run things by me sometimes when it's more complicated cases or they're not sure, which I appreciate, because again, that is patient safety 101. Rather than they're not trained in something, but they get a difficult case and then they go rogue with it, and then the patient gets. That is not what we want, and that's not why this whole system was born out of it. This whole system was born because we just don't have enough physicians, and we need access to care, and we need more people to be able to take care of the number of patients that are coming through our doors. But again, there are consequences to things like this, and this is what we're experiencing. And of course, we can see there have been errors in medicine, there have been increased costs associated with things. But by and large, the message I want patients to understand is to learn those differences and also learn how to address them. It's okay to call um, them, by the advanced practice designation. They're not doctors, so that's a difference. I know they might feel uncomfortable because usually it's okay, do I call them by their first name, do I call them by their last name? So everybody defaults to doctor, but again, they're not doctors, so it's very important for them to understand that, but they will still be taken care of efficiently.
Wow. Thank you, Christine.
Well, yeah, I agree with everything Norma says. The patient is the priority and they'll be getting taken care of. I think the fact that there are more and more APPs being used in clinic settings is twofold, because there are not enough doctors, and then APPs are also cheaper because their salaries are less. So it's less expensive for the organization to have five APPs and one doctor than to have five doctors. And the patients don't understand those little nuances and why things are like that. And then I think also a lot of the times the patient doesn't really care who is taking care of them as long as they get well taken care of. And so that's why they don't care. They'll call the nurse practitioner, doctor, whatever, you're going to give me my blood pressure medication, it doesn't matter. Like if I call you doctor or don't call you doctor, will I get my medication? But it is important for them to know the difference when there is something that's complex. Even some simple things too. I've seen some simple things, gone wrong, or something that I feel should have been simple, but that's because my training is different and more advanced. So for me, it's like, okay, this is simple, but when I see that something different was done by an APP, I'm like, why did you do it this way? This is pretty simple or straightforward to have done, but then because their training is different and the patient doesn't know any different, and some of them build relationships with their doctor. So you see your doctor today, the next visit and next visit you see somebody else. I know you're confused. I want this person to be taking care of me. This is the person that I signed up with. And so them understanding that difference, it's important to understand, but knowing that we're all a team trying to help is also a priority. I think we should try to get them to understand.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, dear listeners. We will be ending our first part on this question, and then we will continue on part two turning our attention to dealing with customers and patients, because it seems like at the end of the day, from what I'm gathering from Dr. Obona and Dr. Tolu Ajayi, the physicians and the APPs are on the same theme. The goal is to create access. The goal is to make sure our patients are taken care of. But yes, though, there are differences. There are differences in the dynamic that the patients do face day to day. And so making that clear will be helpful. So, dear listeners, tune in with us same time next week as we finish our conversation on outward smiles, inward grimace. Today has been the paradigm of medical practice, but the scope of our conversation is really about work in general, from when you're getting out of training to before you are fully established in what you are doing and know what you are doing, where to get the stethoscopes hanged and all those things. So we'll see you same time next week. Bye-bye.